Everyone starts yoga for a reason. And for me, it was simple. I just wanted that lean, sculpted yoga body and I wanted to nail a handstand. And I've practiced pretty much every day for the last 1,826 days. And I did the work. I stretched, I breathed, I did everything. And after all this time, I still don't have a thigh gap and I can't do that handstand. And for the longest time, I was quite frustrated and I wondered, is this actually working? Because I started off with all these good intentions. And although I rolled out my mat all those years ago, ready to win at yoga, I had no idea that the real victory wouldn't be measured in muscle tone or in like perfecting some poses, but rather in a currency that I didn't even know existed. I'm Sushmita, but you can call me Sushi, and today I'm going to be sharing with you the 5 most overlooked signs that showed me that my yoga practice was actually truly changing my life. Because this practice changed my life, and today I spend all my time helping others just achieve the same kind of transformation and results I've gotten through this practice. And my Yoga Mastery program, there's a link for that in the description below, is basically a structured way for anyone to kind of go from zero to a place where they can actually use this practice to not just become more toned or physically fit, but rather as a way to kind of train their mind and also see how this ripples out into the rest of their life. But don't worry about that for now, because I made this video for those of you that feel stuck or discouraged or feel like your yoga practice isn't working in a physical sense. 5 years ago, I was this kind of classic yoga junkie. I had a ClassPass membership and I used it to go to every single vinyasa class out there. I would go to vinyasa on some sort of surfboard, TRX vinyasa. I did all these different things and I was lifting heavier than I was doing more burpees than I could count, and I was trying to basically optimize my body and make sure that I was in peak performance. I was counting every calorie, eating more protein, and doing all the things that you're supposed to do when you're a fitness junkie, right? So because I kept checking my progress in the mirror every day, I was noticing that, I was getting better, I was getting stronger. And then I moved to a little experimental township called Auroville. It's in Pondicherry. And basically there was no gym. There was no fancy gym with equipment and all of these things. So I was forced to kind of just use yoga. And until then, I'd practiced Hatha yoga. I've been practicing for a long time, but not seriously, not in the way that I saw it as a reliable anchor in my life. So I went to the closest yoga class and it was an Ashtanga class. And the reason I chose this was because I wanted to put myself through a physical challenge. And I knew that Ashtanga is a physically challenging style and it's all about looks and accomplishment, and all the videos I'd seen on the internet were of people doing really advanced poses. And even when I went to the class, I saw some pretty advanced stuff and I was like, oh my gosh, this is a room full of type A overachievers just like me. And I thought, okay, this is the perfect style for me. Let me commit and see what happens. And the first thing I noticed after all these years is that I'm actually aware of my breath now. Previously, when I used to go to vinyasa classes or even just, go to the gym, I noticed my breath was obviously a part of, my life. I was born with it and I'm going to die the day my breath goes out. But I was trying to figure out where my foot went and where my arm went and what to do between transitions and all of these classes that I honestly never even thought about my breath. And whenever I would take a difficult position, I noticed myself tensing up and holding my breath and not breathing at all. And I knew my body was just trying to achieve the shape, but I didn't think that the breath would be the actual gateway to achieving the shape. And when I started Ashtanga, I realized, wow, when I match my movements to my breath, I no longer feel like I need to kind of sit down quietly and meditate and do that separately, because the practice itself turned into this kind of movement meditation. And because I learned that movement can be meditative, it began to become like a medicine for my mind. And slowly over time, I could hear and stretch both my inhales and exhales. And it was beautiful because while I was practicing, I could then consciously regulate my breath and consciously regulate my attention and use that to deepen into the shapes. And I stopped relying on my physical strength or expecting accepting myself to be stronger than I currently was. And I stopped relying on just this kind of mental sheer grit, willpower to get through a class. And because the breath became this steady companion and I learned how to shape the breath and work with the breath, this awareness also spilled into the rest of my life. It became this kind of tool where I would be standing in a grocery line, for example, and as soon as someone cut me off, instead of getting irritated or pulling out my phone and ignoring everything and just angrily scrolling, I used that as an opportunity to kind of be more present and do those 12 𝐸𝐸 breaths and just tune in and sense into my internal environment. And because it became such an anchor for me to get back into the present moment, it set this steady rhythm that I could always access in the chaos of my daily life. And I think it's so beautiful because then whenever things triggered me or pulled me out of my center, learning the language of my breath gave me this kind of direct line of communication to my nervous system. And this tool, I promise you, when you learn it and you learn how to utilize it, it can completely transform your life. I know it did mine, and that's why even before I teach any shapes or any asanas, I ensure that my students learn this foundationally. There's even a couple of modules just dedicated towards understanding how important it is to work with the breath. Because without shaping the breath, without doing this with our breath, we're kind of just moving into shapes and it becomes much more like superficial. So the first thing that actually changed my life after starting Ashtanga is working with the breath. Now, the second sign is that I redefined what it means to be strong. Now, we all know that, strength is not something that yoga is known for. When we think of yoga, we think, okay, flexibility, she can do splits, or she can do, like stand on her head maybe, but it's never really about like true strength or like shoulder strength or leg strength, because we go to the gym for that kind of stuff. So a massive sign of my progress came from this kind of quiet functional strength that I had built up over the years. And it's not like bulky muscle. As you can see, I'm still not very strong per se, but it's not like the kind of strength that you get from lifting weights. It's a kind of like integrated intelligent strength that supports my whole body. And my old definition of strength was just like, how much can I lift? How many push-ups can I do? Am I still able to do a pull-up or not? But now I think like I redefine strength as also developing resilience. And resilience wasn't just like gritting my teeth and pushing through it and showing up and like suffering through the pain no matter what. Yoga gave me this much richer, much more like powerful definition of both strength and resilience. I think, yeah, yoga definitely builds physical strength because of the number of vinyasas you're doing in an Ashtanga class, for example. But the real strength, the true strength that I found was more than physical. It was mental and emotional. It's the kind of strength that develops when you hold a position and you breathe calmly through the discomfort. And just as you watch your body kind of screaming at you and you're just going to stay in the discomfort instead of immediately giving up, that kind of strength, that staying power kind of built over time. And now I really understand why I had to build enough strength through the practice itself to stay and build strength instead of tensing up or releasing and moving out of the experience. Because I was doing the same series of postures every single day, and the way I knew that I was getting better was something that used to be extraordinarily challenging for me, then slowly began to become easier and easier. It's not that the poses got easier, it's just that I got better and I got stronger and I got more resilience. I got more resilience to kind of stay and sit in the fire. And I didn't see resilience as being stiff and unbreakable and unshakable and strong, because that developed this kind of over-masculine tendency in me. But Ashtanga and yoga as a whole taught me that strength and resilience is about being flexible and adaptable and holding a container for the feminine to kind of flow. It's not about ignoring pain, because pain is a part of our lives, but it's about like acknowledging it. And with the strength and the stacking of the body masses and working with it, I learned that I can derive strength from my own body. I can derive strength from the center of my core and use the bandhas to kind of originate strength from the inside rather than just work on individual muscles to get myself stronger. So the way that this strength kind of translated into my emotional life was that I just got way more resilient. It's not about like stuffing down feelings anymore for me or like letting them drown me. It's about creating space and creating the structure within myself to process the feelings, allow that stuff to come up. And almost I slowly developed this kind of like awareness and softness in my body. And whenever the mat brought up all this physical discomfort for me, I met it with a quiet strength, not like a forcing through it, pushing through it, gritty, let's get stronger strength. But I noticed how real strength in people is actually quiet. It's not about a selfie in a gym. It's not about like how much you can deadlift. It's much more like a soft strength that shows up in the way you hold yourself. And even resilience, it's soft and quiet. It's not loud and showy at all. So my definition of strength, I think, completely did a 180, and I'm so grateful that it did, because otherwise I would still be chasing my next personal best instead of like focusing on how to derive strength from the current strength I have, instead of reaching out and accessing some strength out there in the future that comes only from lifting weights. And this leads me to the third sign, because the third sign is that I became a lot less reactive. I used to be really easily irritable, and every time, I got off the mat, I would feel calm, I would feel great. And then by 11 a.m., I would like snap at a coworker or get irritable, or whenever a conversation got heated, I would get super triggered. I would instantly feel this like surge of anger, and I would make a snappy comment. But although I'm still not perfect and I'm working on it, this is like, all of these are just like lifelong realizations. I have way more access to the tools whenever I need it. So each time I went into a pose and I stood there, like in Warrior 2, for example, and I held that warrior-like energy, and I knew my thigh was on fire, and I was like, I really wanted to leave. But because of the teachers, the wonderful teachers I've had, they taught me how to breathe and stay with it and notice without reacting. And when I could notice without reacting, every single time I did that on the mat, it kind of became like a training ground for real life. Instead of like bailing and like running away whenever discomfort arose, I was literally rewiring my brain and rewiring my nervous system to stay in that discomfort. And so in real life, whenever a conversation got heated, I reminded myself to pause and breathe and notice and just go slow with it. And each time I elongated the pause between like whatever I was receiving and whatever I had to respond, I had some more access to the tools that I had cultivated on the mat. But before, trust me, I used to be like just tossed in the wind. And these days I still feel the wind, okay? It's not like I'm perfectly like, I'm not enlightened or anything like that. Even though I feel the strong wind these days, I don't let it knock me over to the extent where, I'm sleeping on a couch and I'm giving up. I'm much more just like non-reactive and detached and much more stoic, I would say. But not from a place of like stuffing down emotions, but from a place of noticing and feeling the sensations, feeling what's coming up. Because every single morning for an hour and a half or 2 hours, I noticed that my yoga practice was actually making me more patient, less reactive. And this is where I think it began to create this deep and meaningful change in myself. And because it created this change in myself, I noticed how it was rippling out into my relationships. And sign number 4 is that my reason for practicing actually changed. I think somewhere, I don't know when this happened, but when I first started, my only focus was to try and get Pincha Mayurasana because I saw some yogi on Instagram doing it. I wanted to so badly like post a video of myself doing it. So I would go to the beach and record myself and then like screenshot that half a second of me hovering in the air, and then I would post it on Instagram. But one of the biggest shifts from when I started to now is that my motivation for practicing has moved from posting things on Instagram to actually doing it for myself. And this became only apparent and when one day like I noticed, okay, I haven't posted anything on Instagram, I haven't posted my practice in like months, and I didn't feel anything about it. And I gradually noticed how like I stopped worrying about how the shape looked, and rather it became something I did for myself. It became something that I did for my mind rather than something that I did to show off. And the practice, when it became my time to connect to myself, to check in with myself and to untangle all the knots in my mind and my body, it became medicine. And when it was medicine, it was no longer like something that I did for the outside world to get validation or anything like that. I knew this shift happened when I was traveling. I think I was traveling to the UK to visit my brother at this time. And I was in his apartment. It was a tiny little apartment. And I rolled out my mat at 5 a.m. And it was just after I'd landed. And I said to him, like, I really just need to do my practice. And I barely had enough space to like roll around in Garbhapindasana. But that practice, that single practice when no one was watching, like nobody gave me the validation that I looked a certain way, and I knew that I was doing that for myself, not so that I appeared a certain way. I was doing it purely for myself, not for like performance, because when I used to practice in studios, it was a bit performative, you know. I would be like, oh yeah, I'm so flexible, look at me, kind of like, you know, a little bit subtle ego driven stuff. But the drive no longer came from the outside. It was not for a specific result. It wasn't, you know, so that I could master any series or anything like that. It was simply about the act of showing up and doing it for myself. And because I just showed up for myself, in a matter of like 4 years, I think I managed to finish second series, which I think for me is a big accomplishment, even though it's not about the poses or how much you're doing in the series. Lots of people take 10, 12, 15 years to do that, and mostly because they focus on the asanas rather than the internal drive or the unseen, unmoving force that actually informs the asanas. And this like kind of also translated in the rest of my life, because I no longer just do things because they're impressive or because I can show off for a specific result. I do things because they give me joy. Like recently I've been like kind of going back to my creative nature, spending way more time like reading and drawing and pursuing hobbies outside of yoga, outside of the goals and things that I have set for myself, because they bring me joy. And I never thought I would be able to do that, because previously I was all about like, you know, type A, every single moment has to be utilized for something, I can't waste any time. And because my motivation came from just the practice itself and the joy of doing the practice, it became like an anchor in my life. It no longer became one thing that I had to do on my to-do list. And whatever I brought to the mat every morning, I would use the practice to metabolize whatever I was feeling. And even if I was super busy, I wouldn't like kind of skip practice because I'm busy. And when I found myself like no longer focused on my body and focused on how it looked on the outside, I just used it to connect with myself, and it became much more about like the inside rather than the outside. So I think this sign was perhaps the most like subtle, and it caught me out of nowhere, because my reason for my practice suddenly grew, and it became about like showing up as a different person for my family, for my partner, for my friendships. It became, who did I show up as, and can they get the best version of me, rather than can I do it for myself so that I can, you know, post a picture of myself doing Pincha Mayurasana. And this leads me to the last and final sign, which is I actually look forward to Shavasana now. For me, previously, like lying still for 10-15 minutes just felt ridiculous. It was like, why would I do that? That's the worst thing you can do. I was a doer, I was a mover, I would get things done, and doing nothing for 10 whole minutes just felt like a massive, massive waste of time. And my mind would want to go to my to-do list, to like the next meal, or like planning the day. And while I enjoyed that, you know, the rest at the end of the practice, I didn't know what to do because the silence was just deafening and I wanted to fill the silence with something. But one of my sure signs that I've made real progress on the mat is that my relationship to the closing sequence and Shavasana has changed. I no longer see the closing sequence as this random, like hard, boring, slow part that I just endure at the end. I've come to like crave it. In fact, I noticed that that last part is perhaps the most important part now, and I look forward to it every single day, because it's the most well-deserved, delicious dessert at the end of, you know, a full, hard, difficult practice. And it also changed the way I see myself, because I moved from thinking of yoga as just another workout or just another thing to cultivate physical discipline, to a way to understand and cultivate like this restorative side of yoga. And Shavasana and the closing sequence, of course, it's more than lying down. We all know that it's where you integrate everything. But it's only when I started to experience my mind and body soak up the benefits of the practice, and I learned how to do Shavasana properly, I began to see how that sense of stillness and peace could last a little bit longer in the day. And it's when I could drop in, and I could just not do and just let go and truly allow myself to rest, that I showed up in the world differently. I became a calmer person. And in a world that's always go, 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 doing things all the time, I think doing Shavasana and resting is a radical act of self-care. So if you find yourself skipping the closing sequence or rushing off to work, even if, you have like 5 minutes to do Shavasana, definitely do the Shavasana, because this newfound stillness and this kind of peace that I got from Shavasana completely changed the way that I looked at rest. It wasn't something that, I reserved only if I did the hardest version of the practice. It started becoming not like this weakness or this luxury or something, that's not an integral part of the practice itself. But for me, it became this absolutely vital part of a healthy practice and healthy life. Like, I could sit in a park and just like lie down and watch the sky, which trust me, 5 years ago, if you told me that I was just sitting in a park and doing nothing, I would be like, are you mad? Like, you should be writing, or you should be reading, or you should be looking at something and learning something. So that nothingness and the boredom and allowing boredom to just be, it's given me a sense of peace, a sense of clarity, and most importantly, a sense of like rest and rejuvenation. And I think in the end, though I didn't get a thigh gap and I didn't get the handstand yet, although I can do a slight press, in these last 1,826 days, I realized that how you show up on the mat is how you show up in real life. And the mat is this perfect little laboratory for the rest of your life. Because when you get frustrated and when you get irritated that you can't hold a balance, you're practicing it for real life. When you get angry, if you quit instead of just stay and breathe and survive the discomfort, that's where you actually train yourself to face adversity effectively. Every single practice is an opportunity to watch these patterns, because the practice is basically a mirror for your life. And the compassion that you give yourself while you're on the mat is the way that, it actually translates into the rest of your life. And yoga doesn't just change your body, it also changes your mind. And for me, I think that was the most useful part. So 5 years later and 1,826 days of practice later, am I more flexible? Yes, absolutely. Am I stronger? 100%. But if you ask me, what did yoga give you? That's not what I would talk about. The most profound changes have been the ones that I wasn't even looking for, because I came to yoga for my body, but I stayed for my soul. I stayed for my mind. I stayed for the things that it gave me in my relationships in the rest of my life. And while the physical stuff is nice, it's nice to have like a toned body and all that, it's not so much about that. It's more about the flexibility I've gained in my mind and the strength that I found in my spirit to make these videos, to teach people and create a program that actually helps and serves people. So that's all I have for you today. By the way, if you're struggling to quiet your mind and get on the mat, there is a link in the description below. It's not a 21-day yoga challenge or a free wellness webinar. It's just a link where you can set up a call with me. If that resonates with you, set up a call with me. Let's chat, because only if I can help you, then I will invite you to join the program. You don't have to click, you don't have to buy. All I'm saying is there is a way to kind of do this in a structured, methodical pattern and kind of help you experience what I experienced. Because if you enjoyed this video and if you kind of resonate with all the stuff that I'm talking about, then make sure that you hit the like, subscribe, and all the things that YouTube asks you to do to make sure that you keep getting my videos, because then it tells the algorithm that, you want to watch more videos like this. But anyways, I'm so happy that you watched till the very end, and I'm so glad that you got something out of it if you did get something out of it. So have a lovely, lovely day ahead. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.